Hey, this is Corey Miceli on the Corey Miceli Show. Got my sidekick, Matthias Bergstrom Anderson, holding it down over in Denmark. Today, we got one of the top athlete performance coaches in the galaxy with us, Ethan Banning of Triple Threat Performance down in Arizona. I'm not going to try to introduce you because you've done so much cool shit. I'll miss a bunch of it. So, Ethan, we're on Rap Fiend Radio, broadcasting on YouTube also. Just tell the audience a little bit about what you've done, what you're doing, and where you're going.
Well, so I've been in the human performance world for 30 years. And, I guess in the last decade or so, mostly on the treatment side, taking care of athlete injuries and things of that nature prior to that, and concurrently spent a lot of time in the performance side, working in the NFL, working in Major League Baseball, working, at the collegiate setting, working private sector, pretty much anywhere with anyone, to help them run their race to find human performance. That
Right.
led me down the path of, treating patients and doing patient cares because, inevitably folks are going to have bumps and scrapes along the way. And, at some point in my late 20s or early 30s, I thought, how long am I going to want to stand on a weight room floor at 55 or 60 years old? And maybe moreover, our athletes of that teenage and early 20s population going to resonate with me. And if I can fix pain, I certainly am going to be a more sought after resource. So then, that training began, and that was roughly 20 years ago, I suppose. And then in the last 10 years, I've run my own, patient cares clinic and done some pretty unique things with some pretty cool technology.
Yeah, let me jump in. First of all, I want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart for the help you gave me. Back in 2019, I suffered a pretty wicked injury, a patellar tendon rupture. And you reached out to me right away. You said, "Hey, Corey, I got something for you." And you sent me like a $30,000 pulsed electromagnetic frequency generator. Am I saying that right?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. And I want to turn it back over to you because I think that technology is incredible. It helps. Like, as you talk, I'll kind of pipe in and let you know how it actually helped advance my recovery. And I think it's phenomenal technology that people need to know about. So fill us in.
Well, so PEMF, pulsed electromagnetic field therapy, is what you referenced in. So, yes. I mean, I think at least the gold standard of, discussing that is NASA uses PEMF. There are thousands of PEMF devices around the world. They're used all over the world for many, a wide array of things. But in regard to the discussion today, I think that NASA's usage is probably a really critical one. And they use PEMF for muscle and bone wasting in astronauts that are in a non-gravity environment, sort of akin to somebody that's in a cast or had an injury like your situation. It helps. So what it does is it helps with muscle wasting, but really at a cellular level, we're helping it heal tissue faster. We're helping with recovery. So we improve microcirculation, we improve protein synthesis and ATP production, all for those listening, your listener may be a more educated listener, but for the average listener, that really just means you heal faster. So if you've got, muscle tears, tendon ligament sprains, strains, your bone fractures, we're going to cut the healing process down significantly. And I know you experienced that with one of our devices. I firsthand have experienced that also. And my daughter too. And I'll let you get, kind of tell your story a little bit about that. And then maybe we'll share a little bit about ours.
Yeah, I think I got it. I started using it just like maybe 10, 12 days post-surgery. And literally after the first day of doing it, the scab on my incision on the knee fell off, and it looked like it had been healing for a month, like overnight. It was absolutely radical. Like the doctor, when I went back for the checkup, couldn't even believe it. And it was pretty well. I'll give you this Quentin Tarantino approach, back and forth and then in between. Like 10 months, not even that, 8 months later, I was jumping out of the back of a pickup truck, moving weight equipment around and like really moving like I never really had an injury to speak of. I met a couple other guys that had the same surgery at a very, very similar time. And they were at about where my progress was like 2.5 months out. So,
Yep.
I mean, the accelerated healing from the thing was just absolutely radical. And one thing I would, if anyone knows about a patellar tendon reattachment, that leg, like, I don't know, the range of movement in it is like completely neutralized right away. So within
the range of motion and the atrophy, I mean, it gets smaller. I mean, there's all kinds of factors there. The reattachment, the tendon takes months to reattach typically. I mean, when we're looking at a recovery process from that, that is a major, major deal. And especially a guy your size, carrying that weight around like that, that's a serious situation.
Yeah, I mean, I was so thankful to be able to use that thing. And like, so I had my surgery, just the end of August. I remember by December, I was squatting like 320 for 20 reps, able to do, my movement was good. What's that? September, October, November, a few months into it, I was actually like functioning on a day-to-day basis that no one would really know I had the surgery. I knew it wasn't like 100% back. But like I said, I remember by May, I remember just instinctively like jumping out of the back of the truck and not even remembering I had the injury. So, I mean, again, if we don't really understand what that type of surgery can do to a person, it might not sound that impressive, but it's pretty fast recovery in the big picture of that.
Well, one thing I got to mention, so we don't make that happen for you without my guy, the medical director that invented our device from a company called Electrons Plus, named Dr. Simon Billingham. And I know you're forever grateful to him, and I am too, for letting me do that. With the PEMF, there are a couple things, that people that haven't been through injury. Now, I think a lot of people maybe listening to this podcast have had, suffered some injuries or spent some time because
we've got all types of listeners out there, man.
You're under the barbell very long. There's gonna be some stuff go on. Well, I think what we both know is weightlifting is a great antidepressant. And what we also know is the injury is a very big depressant, right? So it causes, the thing about PEMF is it's FDA approved to treat anxiety, clinical depression. So like what coincides with injury can be anxiety, depression. So not only are we helping, that blood flow, and what you mentioned about the scar, it's interesting. So a bunch of the research that I've read, and there's a book called The Body Electric, and I actually think you can see it on Amazon TV, that describes this in great detail, that the salamander is the most closely related animal to us that can regrow limbs, and they're trying to figure out why they can and we can't. And scabbing was a big issue in that book. And your scab falling off is a huge element in healing. So when the scab's there, it's like this protective layer from it getting hurt, but it's also a defense mechanism from it healing it, because the microvoltage in our system drops down. And when it drops below 20 millivolts, our cells die. And we needed to jump back up over 50 millivolts to regrow new cells. Well, in scabbing, for whatever reason, that blocks that micro voltage from moving like that. So when the scab falls off, the healing goes into an exponent type of healing situation where it was interesting. I didn't know that story until right now today, that your scab fell off like that, but that's really remarkable in terms of healing faster. And it's what they've described PEMF doing, and it goes into great detail in that book about, a salamander never scabs, and they instantly start growing the limb wherever the injury occurred, and then why that happens, and then that humans don't do it that way. And the sooner we can get the scab gone, the sooner the scar will heal, or whatever the situation is will heal up.
Right. Well, you'll find this interesting too. And I'm trying, from a user standpoint, on using the PEMF, it's kind of like, it makes you feel like you're in some kind of crazy, like Star Wars healing center. There's a plate that whoever's helping the person with it, like places their hand on, the energy or electricity, whatever the hell it is, flows through that person and then goes into a specific body part of whoever has the injury. So the girl that was helping me with it, like had a shoulder injury that kind of never had healed. The day after she first used it, she got nauseous. Her shoulder hurt like hell. But then about 24 hours later, her shoulder felt better than it had in 10 years.
Bro, I experienced that same thing. So Dr. Billingham invented the only practitioner guided version of a device that we're aware of on the market.
Okay.
And I personally, from 25 years of football, when I started treating with his device, was dealing with significant symptoms of CTE. Now, because that signal, like you described, is running through me into the patient every day, all day.
Yeah.
After 6 months of treating, my hormone profile had changed from a blood testosterone significantly, statistically speaking, and my CTE symptoms were gone. Like, I couldn't have had this conversation. I couldn't have done this podcast 10 years ago or 6 years ago, even. I would be sitting here searching for words, not able to find my language quite right. Days were just kind of gray and overcast. I mean, I think many football players that played for a very long time have experienced some of this, and I'm tremendously blessed that, it's gone. And I can't necessarily tell you why, but I know that we've got roughly 100 trillion cells in our body. When we dump electrons into our system, they repel from each other like magnets. When they do that, everything, functions more efficiently. Things heal. We get in a healing state, and all of a sudden we feel better.
Yeah.
So, that to kind of my shoulder, I had my left shoulder, which is my dominant arm, completely reconstructed on July 1st of last year.
Okay.
And so that was 5 tears plus about a 3/4 inch bone spur. So my supraspinatus was fully torn. My bicep tendon was fully torn. My infraspinatus was torn. I had a labrum slap 2 tear, and my subscapularis was torn.
Buff right up.
Yeah. So they just buffed it up a little bit. And so they wanted me to wear a sling for 6 weeks. And then after 4 weeks, we'd start light rehab. I threw the device on my shoulder not the day of surgery, the first day after surgery. And I've got some pretty remarkable pictures, but day 1 to day 8 healing, like in bruising, like I've got a black shirt on and my arm was black, like my shirt all up under my armpit. And it looked like my normal arm a week later. It was remarkable. And what I can tell you is in 8 weeks, I was throwing a baseball.
Wow.
And so it's a great story because my surgeon's one of the most elite guys in the country, a Harvard trained guy that, did his fellowship at the Andrews Clinic. And because we have half of Major League Baseball here, we've got some really good like hand, shoulder, and elbow surgeons. And Dr. Letterman is his son is best friends with one of the clients with whom I work. And Cooper was over at his house, and he was like, "Did Ethan really throw a baseball at 8 weeks?" And the kid goes, "If there's anybody in the world that you can ask that question to and they know it with absolute certainty, I'm that person." He goes, "Huh, how's that?" And he goes, "Because he was throwing it to me." My surgeon was blown away. And so, we went on to the, return to throw program, and, he had some arm care stuff he needed to do. And so I was like, well, I'll throw with you. And it was fine. It felt great. And my shoulder hadn't felt this good in 20 years.
That's pretty cool.
So, and Sophia, my youngest, had a displaced fracture of her first metacarpal when she was 6. Until it was going to be 8-week recovery time. They put 2 pins in it. 19 days later, they took the pins out, and she was completely healed up, cast off, and we were all done and ready to go.
Right.
And that story is how we got into the NFL. So I worked for the Carolina Panthers for a while, and you guys back in your area remember a guy named Greg Olson, who's a pretty solid player. Well, Olson had broken his foot, and this is probably like 2016 or 17, somewhere in there. And I text Greg because I'd worked with them and just said, "Hey, man, I know you know me as a strength coach from my time there several years back, but let me tell you about what I've been doing for the last few years. And he was like, let's go. So I was on an airplane out there. He had been put on short-term IR, and he used the device, and he was able to come back from IR that year and play, which they said would never happen in the doctors. And I know that one of my dear friends is a guy named Derek Anderson, who was Cam's backup forever there. He was an all-pro in Cleveland, played out here in Arizona. And DA says to me, he goes, when the doctors saw the x-ray 5 weeks later, when they were looking at, like, they were like, how'd you get so much bone growth? Like, what the heck? And they called the Olson and DA are great friends. He called DA into the room and was like, dude, check this out. And showed him on x-ray how much bone growth they had. Here's the thing. It's interesting about the device. It's like, there are things that it does that I don't really like to tell people about, because it makes me I feel like I wouldn't have believed me, except I've felt it do it. And you wouldn't have believed me. I mean, you were like, sure, I'll give it a try. I mean, I'm like, yeah, I'm going to send you this device. And you're like, all right, cool. And then you use the device. And I think that you now recognize what I'm talking about. Like, it is life-changing,
really is.
And it's just been tremendously a tremendous blessing to be able to share that with people and help them heal faster, help them feel better sooner. I mean, let's be honest, like, there's not much worse than not being able to do what we want to do and like to do in life because of an injury.
Oh yeah.
And being able to help people with that.
Like, to your point, those gentlemen, which were similar aged as me, one of them was a former NFL player. His son plays at Wisconsin now. I forgot the gentleman's name, but both of them, like, literally just talked about, like, they literally fell into, like, a pretty wicked state of depression after the surgery. These guys, I never felt depressed before, but it's like, I just can't take on the days like I used to. So, that is a common thing with some of those. I think, especially with that, like, those tendon reattachments, major ones, I think it does, like you said, depress the body so bad that it's like, probably should be protocol to get some kind of, like, mental health treatment after that type of surgery, man.
Well, I mean, when you look at it, you're on a central nervous system depressant when they give you opiates or opioids, number one. Number two, especially when it's, and I was really referencing, but I mean, this is true. I mean, I think once you've played athletics at a major college level or professional level, you're kind of always an athlete. In fact, I like to treat most people. I mean, life is a sport, we're playing it,
100%.
And really that depression piece of it is when you're reminded that you can't reach up and wash your hair or open the door in front of you. That in and of itself is depressing, let alone when we've nervous system depressed through meds, it slows the healing process and makes us feel lower and slower. We know blood flow and, the reason, the runner's high and getting that blood flow is so important to our mental health, and we get it out of weightlifting, but whatever. I mean, it's the same thing. Like, they get a runner's high. We get under a squat bar. The amount of like blood flow that you create when you do that is pretty remarkable. And what that does is sort of like a 1960s or 70s muscle car. If you stop driving it for a while, it's going to cough and spit and have break loose, and the same thing's true with, an athlete. If they stop driving it for a while, things don't work quite right.
They don't work well at all.
And jumps, and so, and that's one of those things where you just go, oh, I get it. And you're absolutely right. As part of a rehab protocol, at minimum, people should be, an open dialogue needs to be discussed about, hey, these are some of the things you should expect when this happens.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how valuable that's been for some of my teenage and early 20-something athletes when they've gotten hurt and just said, hey, look, I've been through this. Here's what to expect here. This is going to happen. Like, I don't expect an easy road here, both emotionally, intellectually, or physiologically. Like, it's not going to be easy. And here's what, you're ostracized from your team because they're just moving on with life and you feel left out. I mean, there's so many factors there that we could just, we could spend a whole weekend on. But, yeah, I mean, I think you're onto something. We could do better for patient cares for sure that way.
Most definitely. Here, let me jump subjects with you, Ethan. I was just did a little reflect. I mean, both of us like were like completely deep into like high performance training for athletes, and I was like, what inspired me to do that? I remember just kind of reflecting on my life and when I really got an interest in that. I think the first time I can recall really being intrigued by like, athletic development was I was maybe like second or third grade playing soccer. My mom wouldn't let me play football, probably because it was too expensive or whatever. I don't know. But so I went out and played soccer. There was an Islander coach, and this is in North Carolina in like the late 70s. He's a black guy from the islands. And he had us doing stuff that was just radically different than any other coach would have us do. Basically, he was developing our athletic ability. And even at that young age, I felt myself like just changing and getting quicker and better and faster, like just after like a couple practices. Now, the families down there were pretty much racist pieces of shit, so they chased the guy off. But that really stuck with me. It was just a testament to how adaptive the body is when you can like put it through some type of process where it's like it's learning a new skill. So that kind of stuck with me. And I think it was watching Rocky IV was like the next big domino that fell. And I knew I wanted to like help athletes completely dominate their field after that. But anyway, what got you into it?
I think it's interesting you say domino that fell. There were probably three or four key moments in time that I can point out. Number one is I have an older brother, and and we actually played football together at Eastern for a year, and then he's older, so his eligibility was kind of messed with, so he was out of eligibility, so he was done. But he was smaller as a kid, and he's very intellectual, and he was always looking for something to make him better. And so if you remember in those days, it was muscle magazines, right? In the back of the magazine, it was like the Cybergenics workout, or it was the, Leo Costa, build strength workout, or it was, and so I would say I have memories of about 13 years old. I was reading everything I could get my hands on. And I know that it was happening before that, but I can absolutely point to that time because we had moved right at that time and we were trying to fit into a new community. So I was 13 and he was 16. And he's going into a junior year in high school. He's going to play, he's trying to play. We go from one of the smallest schools in the state where, like, my elementary school, I had 13 kids. We have 3 elementaries in the whole county. Okay. And we moved over to one of the bigger schools in the state, and he was looking for any edge he could find. And so I was an 8th grader, and he was, going to be a junior, and whatever he did, I wanted to do. All right. Now I know we did this goes back, it started before that, but I really dug in at that point. And everything he read, I read. Everything he did, I did. And at that point, I was doing more of the research part of it, and that's just kind of always been in my nature. And then I went into high school, and as a freshman in high school, I wasn't fat, but I was soft, and I hadn't really hit puberty enough yet. And I was on my sports teams, but I didn't really play that much. And
Gotcha.
At the end of my freshman year, I found a weight room. Really, I took all that information I read and I started applying it. And I went from not being that good to starting I lettered in 4 varsity sports as a sophomore. Right.
Wow.
And so that was a big tipping point for me. I went, oh, I lift weights. I all of a sudden went from like one of the slowest kids in the program to now, one of the top running, kids in the program. I'm more explosive. I do different, and so
Yeah.
my sophomore year, I really dug into the weights and that sort of thing. And then I guess it was my junior year, I went in and met with our dean of students, who's a dear friend of mine today, lives down in Southern Illinois, and Dr. Harvey Childs, and said, hey, Mr. Childs, do you think that you could open the weight room up for us in the morning before school, and as a trade out, I'll train you. And so it began. And so this guy, who is I'm forever indebted to, and he would say the same. Like, we have a wonderful relationship. He just came out and stayed at our house a month or two ago, and he really, I would say, was my first client that I ever trained, and he was our dean of student, our assistant principal, right? And that was my junior year in high school, and we got him really, really strong really quickly, and he went and told. I mean, like, he tells a funny story about it where all the coaches come and they're bowing because he squatted like 335 and bench press like 285, or some pretty big numbers for a high school administrator. That's probably 5'5". I mean, he's not a real big dude. And that was a big tipping point for me. But interestingly enough, another really big tipping point was at Eastern Illinois. And this will stand out to you, I think. And I don't know if you've ever thought much about this, but as you know, we didn't have a strength coach that's what they did full time there. We had a football coach who you remember, because Randy Melvin was the guy that did it when I was there, at least in part. But what really they did, they went in with their exercise science program, and they met with them and they got some really good information. And then they brought it over, or Coach Melvin went to them, and they brought it in the weight room. And then really the expectation was, the way I interpreted it, at least, and you can speak to this, was that the juniors and seniors were going to lead and implement what the coaches had said. Hey, here's what we really want to do. But it was kind of this, like, it was an envelope in which we had to play, but it wasn't like you're doing exactly this rep, this set. It was guided. And then the peers came in and led that. And I then came in as a red shirt and did that with our red shirts. And we had a really big class my red shirt year. We had like 51 kids come in between walk-ons and the whole deal. And I know the juniors and seniors led that kind of part of the program with the varsity football program, if you will, the rest of the kids that were playing. And I felt like that was my first kind of internship, if you will, where by the time I went through that program, it was like, by the time I was a junior and senior, it was fully expected that I was going to be one of the people really pulling the strings on that. In the same way that Chris Wilkerson was one of those people when I was a young cat, and now he's the head coach there. You know what I mean? Like, but and I don't know if that was how you would describe your experience, before you transferred to Northern, but that was a huge tipping point for me. I was maybe more passionate about preparing for football than I was playing football. I mean, I've gone back, I've vacillated on that a little bit throughout life, for sure. And just that, the ability, and what the weight room and performance training did for me personally and others around me that I was involved with, it just was like, I want to change people's lives.
Right. Well, I remember, I'll be sure this with you, Ethan. I remember Iron Man magazine back in like the 80s. Like, you talk about, they had some great information, and if you could dig for it, they have like NFL strength coaches write information, weird stuff. You could, if you dug and read those little articles in the back of the magazines, you could come up with some pretty good info. So I remember reading an article about Charlie Francis, and in that era, everybody knew Ben Johnson was, where ran a 963, whatever.
969. I think
with his hand in the air for the last 5 meters. But anyway, so I remember, Charlie Francis had incredible results training sprinters, regardless of who they were, gassed up or not, whatever. He was phenomenal at like maximizing the explosive energy and speed of athletes. So I remember reading a little article about him, and he said the magic formula is a triple body weight squat and a double body weight bench, and do a lot of single leg jumping. So I was like, that's pretty simple. And pull-ups too, I think he mentioned. So my goal as a football player was to hit triple body weight squat, double body weight bench. Well, behold, I hit that triple body weight squat. Never quite hit the double body weight bench, but it was pretty darn close. And obviously not built for like long distance speed, but I remember at my peak, I remember being Ray McElroy side by side, and for 20 yards, boom, we were neck and neck. And I think there is like some kind of formula to that. And I'm not necessarily talking like some powerlifting full squat or anything like that, but a squat, relative to the athlete's, anthropomorphic measures, that sort of thing. Give me your commentary on that. What do you think?
Well, Charlie Francis is clearly a well-respected guy in the right circles. Some people get too far off the road with PEDs and that sort of thing, but Charlie Francis was ahead of his time doing some amazing things. And in that vein of at Eastern, I triple body weight squatted.
There you
And
go.
then when I was playing professionally, I double body weight benched. And I would absolutely agree. I mean, like, I could jump on boxes that people our size couldn't jump on, and I could do things explosively just people couldn't do. And now I will say, for a track and field athlete, triple body weight squat makes a lot more sense. As a defensive lineman, I'm not sure that I would agree that, looking back now, 25 years later, I would say that, when I squatted a little over 800 pounds as a college football player, every moment that I spent searching for a pound above 600 was time that could have been better spent doing something else.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
If anyone knows what you're saying, it's me.
I mean, now in the pursuit of like absolute powerlifting or Olympic lifting or something like that, the pursuit of 5 pounds is what it's about. But in football, it's about performance on the field. 100%. And so I felt like you said, I felt like stronger I am in the squat, the better I play on the field. And there was a point for a long time that was true. And then there was a tipping point where the risk to reward ratio wasn't in line. There are other things that I could have spent time, doing, et cetera, et cetera. At the end of the day, I feel like I had to go through those lessons to be able to teach that lesson later on in life. And what the real lesson there is this. I was a great squatter from the time I was a kid. Like, I squatted well in high school. Obviously, you don't squat over 800 pounds if you're not like genetically a great squatter. But so I did the thing that made me feel emotionally good inside. I was good at squatting, so I squatted. I was good at cleaning, so I cleaned, but I was bad at benching. So what did I do? I didn't do that until I was more mature and later in life, because it took a more mature version of me to understand you got to do the things you're bad at if you want to be better at the overall kind of football, play. Or in baseball, you get kids that can't hit a slider and all they want to do is see fastballs. It's like, well, you don't get to control what pitch you see. You get to control how hard you work at things you don't see, you don't do well. So the lesson that it taught me was, don't do the thing you're great at so much as identify your top 10 list, and let's start working on, if you want to be, an elite competitive athlete, you better work on the bottom 4 or 5, not the top 2 or 3. And that was the lesson and takeaway for me.
Yeah, 100% agree, man. Let's say, Matthias, where we are in time for this first segment.
Yeah, I was just about to say that time is beginning to run out. If you're gonna squeeze in a part 2 as well.
Yeah, it's Corey Miceli Show, Rap Street Radio, Ethan Banning, Intergalactic Sports Performance Guru. We'll take a quick break and we'll be back in a couple minutes.